You're black, you disrespect my girlfriend. Billionaire accuses waitress. What happens next will shock you. Luke Sullivan sat at a lavish dinner table, his mind lost in the sea of fine wine and elegant dishes. Across from him sat Vanessa, the woman who always seemed to draw attention wherever she went. They were the perfect couple: wealth, beauty, and everything one could wish for. As the evening unfolded, a small accident shattered the illusion. Amina, the waitress, carefully brought over their drinks, but as she reached their table, her tray slipped, spilling a drink onto Vanessa's lap. Without a second thought, Vanessa snapped, accusing Amina of being careless, her voice sharp and harsh. Luke, eager to defend Vanessa, jumped up and angrily shouted at Amina. "You've disrespected my girlfriend," he declared, feeling the weight of his wealth and status guiding his every word. But in that moment, Amina's calm response stunned everyone. "You don't know who I am," she said quietly, before revealing the truth that would shatter Luke's world forever. The tension in the room was thick, heavy with disbelief. Amina, standing tall despite the humiliation, looked directly at Luke. Her eyes held a quiet strength that made him pause. "Luke," she began, her voice steady but piercing, "you have no idea who I am, do you? Let me explain." Vanessa's shocked silence only deepened the mystery hanging in the air. Amina took a deep breath, her gaze softening slightly. "I know your family. In fact, I'm your half-sister." Luke's world seemed to tilt, and for a moment, everything around him blurred. His mind raced, trying to grasp the magnitude of her words. His father had an affair? How could he not know this? The realization hit him hard, but there was more. Amina continued, telling him how she had grown up in the shadow of his family's wealth, always feeling the sting of being treated as lesser. "Your father was the man who abandoned me," Amina said softly. "While you had everything handed to you, I struggled for every little thing." Luke's mind was racing now, but his pride fought against the truth she was speaking. He tried to push it all aside, but there was something about her calmness, her resolve, that kept pulling at him. The truth was unraveling, and with it came the undeniable weight of guilt and confusion. As Amina's story unfolded, Luke felt his foundation begin to crack. She spoke of growing up without the luxuries he'd taken for granted, facing constant judgment for things he'd never even thought about. She was forced to fend for herself, never allowed the privileges of his name or wealth. For the first time, Luke saw the world beyond his own bubble. "I've spent my life battling a system I never chose," Amina added, her voice thick with emotion. "And the people who had everything, the people like you, never even knew I existed." Luke stood there, paralyzed, trying to comprehend everything. What could he say now? Could he even apologize for the life he'd led, the life that had inadvertently caused her pain? The quiet that followed Amina's revelation was suffocating. Luke felt the weight of her words press on him like a heavy stone in his chest. His eyes shifted from Amina to Vanessa, who stood with her arms crossed, confusion and disbelief clouding her face. She had no idea who Amina truly was, and Luke wasn't sure how to explain it to her. "You're really telling me," Luke finally said, his voice strained, "that all this time, my father had a child with someone else? And you?" Amina cut him off, her calm demeanor unshaken. "Yes, Luke. I'm your sister. Your father's mistake wasn't just an affair, it was a life he chose to ignore. And I paid the price for that." She paused, letting her words sink in. "I've spent my life in your shadow, not knowing you existed, while you were living a life that I could only dream of. You've been protected by your wealth, your status, things that I was never given." Luke opened his mouth to speak but found no words. How could he have been so blind? How could he have never questioned the narrative he'd been told about his family, the stories he had accepted without hesitation? Everything about his privileged life now felt tainted. Amina's presence shattered the illusion of perfection he'd so carefully built. Amina, sensing his turmoil, continued, "I didn't want your pity, Luke. I didn't want your charity. But maybe, just maybe, I wanted something real from you. Something human. But all I ever got was indifference." Her words pierced through Luke's carefully constructed defenses. The anger he'd felt towards her moments before began to dissolve, replaced with a gnawing guilt. Was that all he had been? Just another entitled man who thought the world owed him everything, including respect? For the first time, he truly saw her, the woman standing in front of him, not as an employee or some background figure, but as his sister, his family. And yet, there was no easy way to bridge the divide between them. "I didn't know," Luke whispered, his voice trembling, his face flushed with shame. "I didn't know any of this. I didn't know you." Amina took a small step forward, her eyes softening just a little. "That's the point, Luke. You didn't know. You never cared to know." The weight of her words settled over him like a storm cloud, and Luke's heart ached as he realized the truth. This wasn't just about an accidental spill or an argument at a restaurant, it was about years of disconnection, years of living in worlds that couldn't have been further apart. But then came the unexpected. Amina didn't leave. She didn't storm out in anger or frustration. Instead, she stood her ground, meeting Luke's gaze. Her calmness, in contrast to the storm of emotions Luke felt, only made him feel more guilty. "I'm not asking for anything, Luke," Amina said quietly. "But I need you to understand something. This world you live in, with all its privileges and wealth, it doesn't mean a thing if you don't have compassion. If you can't see the people around you as equals." Luke's heart sank further as the reality of her words sank in. Compassion. That was the one thing he'd never truly considered. Not with the people he worked with, not with the woman standing in front of him, and not with the woman who had shaped his life in ways he hadn't even known. The tension between them wasn't just about the past, it was about their shared future. Could Luke find it within himself to be the brother Amina had needed all along? Or would he remain stuck in the world that had kept him blind to the truth? Luke felt the weight of the moment, the heavy silence of realization, and he understood, finally, that the bridge back to family, back to love, would not come from wealth. It would come from something much harder to earn: trust, respect, and forgiveness. But he wasn't sure how to begin. Amina's eyes softened for just a moment before she spoke again. "I've spent years hoping you'd know me, and I'm not sure that's ever going to happen, Luke. But I can't carry this bitterness anymore. I just can't." Her words, spoken with quiet resignation, forced Luke to take a deep breath. The truth, no matter how difficult, was undeniable. It was time to face the consequences of his past ignorance. The days following the encounter at the restaurant were some of the hardest Luke had ever faced. He couldn't shake Amina's words from his mind. They echoed in his head with every step, every meeting, every interaction. The world he'd built, his empire, his luxury, his status, suddenly felt hollow. It had all been founded on a lie, a truth buried so deep he hadn't even realized it was missing. And worse, Amina had been right. He hadn't cared enough to notice. Vanessa, though she had no idea of the gravity of what had happened, noticed the change in him. The light-hearted banter they'd always shared no longer had the same ease. Instead, there was a heaviness to his silence, a deep sadness that she couldn't quite place. The tension between them grew, and with it, a fracture formed that Luke could not repair. One evening, as Luke sat alone in his office, looking out over the sprawling city that had been his kingdom, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Amina. "I don't expect you to respond. I just wanted you to know, for whatever it's worth, I'm trying to move on." Luke read it over and over, his heart heavy with the weight of her pain. He hadn't responded to any of her messages since the restaurant. He had felt lost, unsure of how to approach her, unsure of how to fix what was broken. The shame of his behavior lingered like a shadow, haunting every decision he made. That evening, after hours of wrestling with himself, Luke made up his mind. He had to face her. He had to try. For her. For the sister he didn't know he had. When he arrived at the modest apartment building Amina had lived in, he hesitated at the door. He had no idea what to expect, no clear plan for what he would say. His hands were sweaty, his stomach in knots. It felt surreal. this idea of showing up in the world of someone who had been invisible to him for so long. He thought back to the restaurant, to the way he'd treated her, to the rage that had clouded his judgment. With a deep breath, Luke knocked on the door. Amina opened it slowly, her expression unreadable. Her eyes, though, flickered with something: curiosity, hesitation. She hadn't expected him to show up. "You came," she said quietly, stepping back slightly to allow him inside. "I needed to," Luke said, his voice hoarse. "I've been thinking about what you said. About how I've been blind to so much. And about how I've treated you. And I don't even know where to begin. I don't know how to fix it, but I want to try." Amina stood in silence for a long moment, taking in the sincerity in his voice. She wasn't sure if she could forgive him yet, if she ever could, but she knew that the weight of carrying this bitterness was more than she could handle alone. She had spent so many years resenting a man who didn't know she existed. Now, she had to figure out how to navigate a new relationship that felt like stepping into uncharted waters. "I don't need you to fix anything," Amina said softly. "I don't need your wealth or your pity. I need honesty. I need understanding. But most of all, I need you to see me. Not as someone beneath you, but as your sister. Your family." Luke swallowed, his chest tightening with the weight of her words. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything I've done and everything I've ignored. I wasn't seeing you. Not as a person, not as my sister. I only saw what was easy for me to see. And I wasn't listening. But I am now. And I'll keep listening." Amina's face softened, and for the first time since their meeting, she allowed herself to feel the smallest glimmer of hope. She could see the genuine regret in his eyes, the realization of his own privilege, and the internal battle he was waging. Maybe, just maybe, they could start to rebuild what had been broken all those years ago. "I don't know how to trust you yet," she said honestly. "But I'm willing to try. For what it's worth, this is the first time in a long time that I've felt like you actually see me. That means something." Luke nodded, the lump in his throat making it hard to speak. "Thank you for giving me that chance. I won't take it for granted." As they stood there in the small apartment, the quiet understanding between them felt like the first step toward something new, a relationship built on honesty, not on the illusion of status or wealth. Luke had no idea where this journey would lead them, but he knew one thing for sure: he wasn't going to let her go again. Before he left, Amina handed him a photograph, one of her childhood. She had kept it all these years, a reminder of a life she had fought so hard to survive. "You never knew me, but I've known you from afar, all these years. This is me. If you want to understand who I am, this is a place to start." Luke took the photo, his hand trembling as he studied her face. It wasn't just a picture, it was a key to a life he hadn't understood, a world he had once ignored. And in that small gesture, Amina had given him more than just her trust. She had given him the chance to see his own reflection through her eyes, a reflection he could no longer ignore. As he walked out of her apartment, the weight of the moment settled in his chest. He wasn't sure what the future held, but he knew that the first step toward healing had been taken. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough to start mending the broken parts of his own heart. Luke sat across from Amina, the weight of their past between them. He had tried everything to show her he was different now, but trust wasn't something that could be rushed. "I want to believe in this," Amina said softly, her voice steady but hurt. "But it'll take time." Luke nodded, understanding. "I'm not asking you to forget. I'm asking for a chance to make things right." Amina's eyes softened. "You've taken the first step." Luke let out a breath, feeling the tension ease slightly. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time, it felt possible. As Amina handed him a family heirloom, she said, "This belonged to our mother. It's yours now." Luke took it, a symbol of the bridge they were beginning to rebuild. He walked away with a quiet promise to rebuild, knowing this was just the start. Weeks passed, and Luke and Amina began to rebuild their relationship, slowly but steadily. Luke worked hard to show Amina he wasn't just the privileged man he once was. They talked, shared memories, and for the first time, Luke truly understood her pain. At a family gathering, Luke stood by Amina, introducing her as his sister. The warmth between them was palpable. His world was changing, not because of wealth, but because of the love he was learning to give and receive. As they shared a quiet moment, Amina smiled. "It's not perfect, but we're getting there." Luke nodded, his heart full. "Yeah. It's a new beginning." The pain was still there, but so was the hope. They were family, after all, and nothing could take that away.